Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Could we call the meeting to order and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance. Some announcements to make before we get started. Emergency exits are on both sides of the room. The restrooms are out the door and to the left. Please be sure to sign the attendance sheet at the back of the meeting room, even if you're a developer and presenting an application. There's business cards at the back next to the sign-in sheet to take with you for email address and phone numbers for planning department. Also on the back table is a copy of the resolutions that may be read tonight along with the agenda. If you would, please silence your cell phones, and any conversations, if you would, kindly take them out in the hall with you. Dave, would you like to give us any updates? Thanks, Dave. And Kim?
So your next meeting will be February 14th, Happy Valentine's Day, with a public hearing for High Point Business Park Building 300 for a balcony. Applicant is requesting approval to construct a 925 square foot building addition on the eastern side of the existing three-story structure to create a terrace area for their tenant. And then Valvoline got pulled from tonight's agenda, and that will be on your next agenda. That is located at 7503 County Road 42. Applicant is requesting approval to demolish the existing building, formerly Denny's Restaurant, and build a 2,080 square foot Valvoline instant oil change. And then any carryovers from tonight.
Thank you. Lisa sent out minutes for the January the 10th meeting. Has anybody or everybody had a chance to take a look at them? Yep. Any comments?
No.
Like a motion to approve them?
Move.
Ernie moves.
Second.
Al second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Or nothing. We've received correspondence from Ms. Amy Bartel, re the McGuire site plan, from Mr. Kaiser, Ms. Nelson, and Mr. Morel, re the 1086 Strong Road subdivision. And I think we're ready to move to the first item on the agenda. Kim indicated Valvoline has been removed, so the first item on the agenda will be the preliminary subdivision for 1086 Strong Road. The public hearing is still open. This is item number 04-PS-2021, 1086 Strong Road, zoned residential 2. The owner is the trust, the Ott Irrevocable Survivors, and it's tax map number 26.00-1-13-100. Before we get started, there's been a lot of concern in the correspondence that we've received. One of the themes that we, that at least I have picked up on is there seems to be a sense that this project is moving forward come hell or high water. And the staff put together a flow chart, and you may have seen it when you came in on the table next to the resolutions. And it shows what the review and approval process looks like. And I thought it's important that the staff put that together and had that out for you so that you understood where we are right now. If you were to look to the left-hand side of the flow chart, you can see an orange box that says preliminary plat application. And to the right of that is a long rectangular block that says preliminary plat review. And that is where we are right now at the information gathering stage. You can see to the right of that is where decisions are made. So the public hearing is still open. We are still gathering data. You may have seen, and I'm sure our developer will talk about the well drilling that has gone on. That is part of the data gathering as part of the decision-making process. In the February 14th Planning Board meeting, we will go through a review of seeker. And that is a New York State requirement that we address. I think there's as many as 19 or 20 items on seeker that we have to examine.
Yep, that's about right.
Yeah. So in the seeker process runs concurrently with the preliminary plan review. And just to kind of go over this three-step subdivision process for those who might be unfamiliar with it, just backing up just to a little bit more detail here. Initially, there was a sketch plan conference between the planning board and the applicant. That occurred here in this kind of yellow phase. And this process has evolved from sketch plan, and now we are in preliminary plan review. And there have been a couple different iterations of this subdivision plan. The most recent one, as you may know, does away with the proposed public water extension and relies on on-site wells. So we are in this preliminary plan phase where the planning board is receiving public comments. Public hearing is open. We're still receiving public comments. And you would, earlier on in the slideshow, there was a list of all of the public comments that have been received to date. And we'll bring that slide back up just so that you have the opportunity to see that the planning board is looking at this information that you've provided, right? So there was even comments as far back as 2021. And there was a period of time where the applicant didn't provide any new information for several months, numerous months, and so the planning board really didn't have anything further to process. But now that more information and the subdivision plans are evolving, we do have more comments. So these are a list of all the comments that the planning board has received to date, and the planning board has received kind of instruction from the planning board chair to re-review each of these comments and be familiar with them as they continue to deliberate over the subdivision application. And can we get back to that chart slide again? Subdivision process. So probably at the next meeting, what we're anticipating is to go through seeker parts 2 and 3 of the environmental assessment form. That's where we will be addressing and reviewing a lot of the comments that have been shared with regard to, community character, the density, that sort of thing. Also impact to wetlands, wildlife, agricultural lands, that sort of thing. So we'll be taking an in-depth look at that and talking about that at the next meeting through the environmental assessment form and environmental review process. After a seeker determination of significance is made, whether it be a POSDEC or NEGDEC, the planning board can take action on the preliminary subdivision application. So preliminary review doesn't constitute, or preliminary approval does not constitute it doesn't give the developer the opportunity to go out and construct the project. They still need to go through the final subdivision phase, which is this darker orange phase here. And then if the planning board gets to final approval here, there's also a final administrative check that you'll see over here on the right side. So again, a copy of this sheet that you see up on the screen is available on the back table if you'd like a copy to take with you. And I think with that, I'll leave it for now.
So just to reiterate, we're still in, even though it's been going on for a number of months, we're still in the data gathering process. No decisions have been made. So I'm hoping that reassures you to know that we are listening and where we are in the process. So having said that, it's all yours.
Good evening. I'm Doug Eldred from Douglas Eldred Site Engineering, representing Steve Deanna, who owns the property and is going through the approval process. As Joe said, I think last month or December, first part of December, I attended a meeting with the town board, and the town board basically said they weren't interested in extending the water main. And the reason for that was a survey that was done by the town board in this quadrant of towns where the other neighbors said that they, weren't interested in extending water mains, even though, of course, you'd get increased fire protection and would have available public water. So that, made us readjust here and go to a well water supply in accordance with the DEC requirements, we have to do 2 test wells on the property, which have been completed. We did them on lots 11 and 7. Don't have a pointer today, but they're the one just to the west of the existing house and then at the far south end. Both test wells were successful in the required flows. We're getting the water quality information checked out, and we expect that to be very good from what the adjacent wells have been. The wells are, we've been cautious with the design of the septic system and the wells with regard to distances between the wells and septic systems. The reason for that is some wells in the neighborhood are fairly shallow, and if they're less than 50 feet of casing for the well, then the separation distance moves from 100 feet to 150 feet. And then if you're in the downstream flow from a septic system to a well, it goes up to 200 feet. So we laid out all the wells to meet the applicable requirements. The 2 wells that have been drilled to date, one was 60-some feet and the other is 90-some feet. So neither of those would have actually required the additional separation, although those will be supplied. I did plot, the other consideration is the wells on the adjacent properties, and I plotted them on and did an analysis for the locations where their particular well may be within 200 feet of the septic system. And if you can go back, the 3 houses on the west side of Taylor Road, across the road from the project, were sort of the critical wells. And I did have data on those wells. I certainly would like to, if anyone could help me out here, I'd like to confirm the well locations that are not just from the public records, but from those exact homeowners. So I appreciate that. It doesn't look like there's any that are anywhere near in the influence area of the septic systems on our property, but of course, we want to be careful of that. So that's where we are with respect to that. So like I said, the well tests are in. I've gotten new comments from the various agencies, and I'm in the process of replying to them. We have a meeting set up with the fire marshal and the fire chief. We're not set up yet, but will soon be set up. They were concerned about the reduced firefighting capacity, which is no different than any other house that's out there now, but I certainly am glad to meet with them and review that particular data. Of course, with well water supply and no hydrants, you have to fight it with the pumper trucks. So that's what all the folks in the neighborhood have for their existing supply. Beyond that, I don't know how much back we want to go. We've made a number of revisions to the plans. We've provided the conservation easements completely around the woods and the stream in the southwest corner. And we've provided berming and buffering all along Taylor Road, wherever there aren't any existing trees that provide that buffering now. So essentially, there'll only be the 3 houses to the west that you would see from Taylor Road, with what we've provided with screening from existing vegetation and buffering. And then once those trees in those areas grow up, there'll be a reduced view of the houses. Other than that, like I said, you really wouldn't see any but the 3 houses to the west on Taylor Road. From Strong Road, I certainly can't buffer that out completely, but there is buffering that's shown in the green. You can see the trees there, and that'll eventually grow in and provide some buffering in that area. Beyond that, I guess I'll just entertain any questions you folks have. And I'm glad to see Ernie back.
Ernie, have you got questions?
I do. I see a structure on this overhead,
Uh-huh.
right over here.
Is that on the adjacent property? Yeah, that's the adjacent property. Not part of our project.
Okay.
There's a house there up on the hill.
I couldn't see a driveway, but I think I see it now.
Yeah, it's kind of. So, obviously, we're looking forward to moving forward. I hope that over the next 2 weeks, I can finish up with any comments that have come in from the review agencies. I think, I did want to mention that not only are we providing berming and trees along the frontage, we're also placing those in a conservation easement. So, the homeowners there can't go in there and remove the trees and the buffering that is provided now. In fact, there'll be, I'm sure, language in the conservation easement that requires replacement of trees and things of that nature for that area.
Okay. Scott, have you got anything?
I just have one question, and
Yeah.
that relates to stormwater. I'm looking at your plans, and I see infiltration basin test
Yeah.
results. And I know with single-family residential, it's always a challenge to come up with something that works with respect to stormwater, and with a project of this particular size, you trip the Phase 2 regs and have to do something with permanent stormwater quality and quantity control. So
Right.
my question is, what is your plan in achieving that result? Is there an area that you're dedicating to that purpose?
Yeah, the infiltration basin itself, we were able to meet the minimum water quality volumes with that.
Okay,
So that in itself, gave us that. And I know that Labella, Wes has been reviewing that. I think they're not quite finished, but they will be there to confirm that. The other issue that was actually brought up that would require either a waiver or a waiver, I guess, was we were asking to not have to provide dry wells for some of the downspouts. But again, if you didn't give a waiver on that, that would provide some more water quality enhancement because the downspouts would infiltrate into the soil instead of having runoff. But the soils themselves are perfect, quite frankly. They're sandy enough to allow for great infiltration, yet not too sandy to allow for rapid infiltration. So very good site for septic development.
so the location of the infiltration area here that I think I see on your
It's kind of in the
plans,
center, yeah.
that's intended to handle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I guess 6 of,
Right.
and then I guess there must be one somewhere else.
Yeah, the other ones just drain directly to the road. Well, actually, just the three western lots.
So is there like over detention then in the,
Yeah, over infiltration maybe is the way to look at it.
okay. I guess I was just curious about that, and the reason I was curious is we talk about the separation distances for wells to septic, and
Right.
I was curious to know how stormwater fits in there too, because that can also
There is
interfere.
I'm trying to make sure I'm correct on this. I think it's a 25-foot separation from the infiltration basin to a septic system. I looked it up, I provided it in the report. I'm not sure if I have that number correct, Scott, but I do know that I looked at that and conformed with it.
Okay. I was just curious as to what your plan was. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, I did see that there were some accident reports that were collected. I forgot to mention that before. I looked at them, it seems like there's a lot of deer collisions. I didn't see any car-to-car collisions at the corner of Strong and Taylor Road. I think I mentioned previously, the one thing we could possibly do to help out that intersection is to provide a grading easement at the northeast corner. If you could switch to the other site plan. Yeah, so where the existing house, if Babette isn't too concerned about the trees that could potentially be harmed at that northeast corner of the property on the existing lot, the developer would grant a grading easement. If you sit out there and you look to the right, which would be to the south, it's not, I think it meets I didn't measure it, but I think it meets the required site distance, but it is obstructed somewhat by the hill that rises up quickly from the road, and, the developer would offer a grading easement that would be required because you'd have to go back onto the property. to cut that hill back and improve that sight distance to the south. You can see that there's a curve in the road there, and so that would help out in that regard. And as I said, when I looked at the accident reports for the stretch that was analyzed, we didn't see any car-to-car collisions at the intersection. Out of whatever number it was, 10 or 12, that went back for 7 or 8 years, most of them were hitting deers, which happens in sort of rural areas quite a lot. So that's kind of my update. You know, we hope to move forward
Yeah.
in the next couple of weeks and get this thing buttoned up.
Al, do you have anything?
No questions or comments.
Wes?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, just to summarize the FOIL request that Labella submitted to the Ontario County Clerk's Office regarding the crash data for the intersection of Strong and Taylor Road. On January 19th, Labella did provide a memo to the town of Victor, and this summarized the information that we received from Ontario County. So, and what we asked for accident records for that intersection over the past 10 years, and the county's response included identification of 24 events, 9 of which, only 9 of those 24, were noted as crashes. And of those 9 crashes, 6 were reported as a vehicle colliding with a deer. 3 other crashes were noted to be a car rollover, an intentional vehicle strike due to road rage, and a car hitting a pole. We weren't able to derive exactly where these events occurred. However, they did note that it was between Taylor Road, along Strong Road, between Taylor Road and then the road immediately to the south. The next one, I can't remember the name of that one. Is it Dryer?
Briar, I think. Better way south.
Yeah. So, and the remainder of those 24 events were noted as a stopped vehicle, a disabled vehicle, livestock, and animal concerns. So we didn't identify anything in the information provided back from Ontario County that noted that this intersection was especially dangerous with respect to crashes there, right? I think we did evaluate sight distance several years ago on another project and found, although the sight distance is, although there is a curve there in the road and the vertical alignment of the road, there are some concerns, but there appeared to be adequate sight distance for a proposed driveway on a different project. So with that, if anybody is interested in seeing a copy of that memo, you can go to the town's planning and building office and obtain a copy. Labella is in the process of completing a review of the new application that's been submitted, including the well information that we received. We need to do some coordination with our septic engineer and be comfortable with the volumes, the drawdown on the aquifer. So we need to study that and provide some feedback to the town as to whether or not there are concerns in that regard. So more remains to be provided to the planning board so that you have the adequate information to be able to make a decision. We're working on that, as well as stormwater. We're looking at the stormwater question as well.
Well, thank you. You answered my question, or you anticipated my question about the aquifer being able to support the wells, so look forward to that. Having said that, the public hearing is still open, so we'll look to anybody with concerns to come and speak. I know, Mr. Kaiser, you have some slides for us, if you'd like to start it off. If we could, try to limit things to 3 minutes and 5 at the max. And we're particularly concerned with any new input you may have based on what you've seen with the wells, et cetera. But
Is there
you're
a
free to speak.
pointer available?
Yes, there is.
I need instructions.
Don't point it at your eyes.
There you go.
Got it. Thank you. My name is Bill Kaiser. I live at 8008 Taylor Road. Could I have, yeah. You've seen this slide before. It suggests 7 new lots rather than the 12 new, rather than 10 new lots. And I want to point out some troubling concerns or conditions in this new proposal that result from trying to squeeze in 10 new lots rather than 7. Next slide, please. The developer has extracted every square foot from the proposed lots for easements, all the cross-hatched areas in these various locations, in order to satisfy the 50% open space requirement. Notice in particular the absurd areas on lots 1 and 2. This little area there and that little area. The tiny triangle between lots 4 and 5. And the illogical areas on lots 9 and 10. I mean, this little area and that little area are unexplainable to me. The developer defines these areas with little squares on the map. Notice the sheer, and on the site, on the actual site, with markers, but doesn't tell us what those markers will actually be or look like. Notice the sheer number of those markers, more than a total of 70 in total. You can be sure any homeowner will either disregard or remove them the day they move in. In short, this open space plan with this number of markers is impractical, unenforceable, unsustainable, and utterly ridiculous, and it results from squeezing in 10 new lots. The house next slide, please. The house on lot number 5 is the only front-loaded garage in the development. I strongly request that all proposed houses have side-loaded garages rather than front-loaded. Fewer houses would allow for this. No one should have to look across the street at an open garage door with garbage cans, toys, and the typical household accumulations inside. I'd like to skip the next slide, but show the last slide. Notice the complicated grading plan, particularly on lots 4, 5, and 6. Nature provided wonderful, flowing, natural terrain known as drumlins. Carving up the land like this is just horrible and probably unnecessary with fewer lots. The design world has a principle called KISS, capital K period, capital I period, capital S period, capital S period, KISS, an acronym for Keep It Simple, Stupid. It states that when a design becomes obviously forced or overly complicated, it is not the right solution. I suggest this proposal, for the reasons stated above, has reached that point. Because this proposal can be done, does not mean it should be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
was Ed Burrell. I probably sent more information to you than you want to ever have. But I thank you for your opening. I appreciate that. It made me feel a little bit better, because I was one of the guys who was very frustrated with what I was seeing. I just want to reiterate one thing to you. And Lisa, were you able to get that slide?
Oh, was it these pictures?
Yes.
Okay, I couldn't get them up, but they all have them. I was able to print
okay.
them all out,
All right.
so they all have them in their packet.
Okay. Well, as you know, I believe that the 1086 proposal is a test case for the whole southwest wedge of Victor. This area has not only been agricultural, but possesses such stunning glacial beauty. Though the agricultural quality will soon be lost, it's inevitable. We can still maintain the beauty of the landscape and the views for the town residents. To do this, developers need unique plans, not just cost-effective ones. And density must be the chief consideration. The 10 two-story houses, I'd be very surprised if not all 10 built are not two-story, that will be built will detract from the glacial beauty of the landscape. The view by the residents will certainly be limited by the extreme density of the houses. Please view the attached photo. Now, for the residents, I attached 2 photos of I called it the well digger. Okay? And if you look at those photos, you will realize that, first of all, the well digger is about the size of a two-story house, about the height of a two-story house, with a roof on it. And you will notice that you cannot see, one of those was taken from the road. You cannot see the tree line at all. So putting a couple of trees in the front along Taylor Road or making a berm is not going to help the view of the people of this town. It's all about density. My last point is, please, don't let the southwest wedge of Victor become another suburb of Rochester, because that's where it's heading, I believe, but a continued treasure for Ontario County. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that would care to comment? Please.
Dolores Fanton, 8082 Taylor Road.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't hear.
Dolores Fanton, 8082 Taylor Road. Okay. First, I want to thank Mr. Kaiser and Mr. Morell, because they're really spot on. I can't agree with them more. One of the things that concerns me is at the last meeting about this subdivision in 2021, when I expressed my concern about all the blind drive going up and the absolute certainty that someone's going to get hurt, probably children, and one of the people of this board suggested that the developer come back with a cul-de-sac plan. That has not happened. Right now, there's 7 cuts proposed on Taylor Road. I live at the bottom of the hill, and I'll tell you right now, I think a lot of the reason there aren't any accidents is the rare times to make a left is left, right, and gun it. It's the only time I ever stomp on my gas is coming out, and I can't tell you how many times it's like, oh, that's close. Most of the time, to come here, I took a right. I went south to come back in because a left turn is so dangerous. So maybe the lack of accidents is because we're not making that left unless we absolutely, okay, I'm going to Eastview and I'm really just not going to go the long way or go down to Miles Square from where I am. So that might be the lack of accidents. But if you come up Taylor Road, if you drive east. It's already very dangerous. Drive up at some time. The blind spots are true. You cannot go into the left-hand lane without risking a head-on. When people have lawn services right now up the hill from me, I generally go down Miles Square because I can't go around the lawn service. With 7 cuts and now trees, I'm not going to see the car, the child, the bike. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, fine, now we're going to have to drive a couple miles away just for us to get over to 251, which seems unreasonable. It's already, this intersection, we have the 2 safety concerns coming up the hill and making the left-hand turn. They're both already dangerous. I'm also concerned about the density. And I put that in my first letter in June 2021, saying if I wanted to live in a subdivision, we would have built our house in a subdivision. We didn't want that. Also, the problem is that I keep writing the same letter and we're not getting the feedback from the board. We are really concerned. I'm bottom of the hill. I'm going to get flooded. It happened one year. It wasn't the people's fault. It was just a weird winter. It froze. My front yard became the catchment basin, and we dug a trench into our woods. It was the only way to drain Taylor Road. The creek froze over, went into our front yard, and we didn't have a clue. The next day, the town of Victor came, or the next week, within reasonable time period. They came and they dug out a big trench on the south side of Taylor Road. With the destruction of all these houses and all the driveways and all the landscaping, which isn't going to soak up the amount of water that's going down now. Because right now there's long grasses in there. Long grasses are from long-term long-term growth cycles. Prairies, the grass depth of the roots is much deeper than newly disturbed. I mean, everybody's dug up a little bit of grass and there's just a little bit of root. These are long grasses. We're not going to get the absorption that we're getting now. So from the bottom of the hill perspective, I'm really not looking forward to having our property flooded all the time. And I don't see anything been done about that. And the problem is we don't seem to get feedback about this. The cul-de-sac, what happened to that? We've already got wells on lots 11 and 7. So in other words, that seems to be set in stone. In other words, to me, it looks like it's going ahead, come heck or high water, because we've already got wells on named lots. If you put in a cul-de-sac, the wells might be in the middle of the road. So we're not getting the feedback.
So,
I just wanted to comment on the wells. So they had to go out and dig test wells to provide qualitative and quantitative information regarding water supply. So I don't know that those are actually going to be permanent wells, but they were test wells just to do some sampling.
Okay. All
So
right.
they aren't authorized to be used as wells at this
Okay.
point.
Okay. I did not know that. Thank
That's
you.
fine.
But what happened to the idea of the cul-de-sac? The request by this board for the developer to come back with the cul-de-sac?
so at this point, we're responding or we're examining the developer's proposal as it's portrayed up on the board. They did not choose to propose a cul-de-sac, so it's not up to us to dictate what he proposes. We're examining his proposal, the merits, the pros and cons of that proposal, and he did not propose a cul-de-sac for us.
But because I don't understand, when your board suggested it, wasn't that kind of a, you should do it?
It doesn't have any weight to force him to do it, ma'am, no.
Okay. All right. How will we find out before it's approved because I'm really concerned about this. I just see so much wrong going on with this. We don't want to live in a subdivision. We don't want that beautiful area spoiled. We understand it was sold to a developer, and we understand there'll be development, but we don't want a subdivision.
I think the best way to understand is to continue to attend as you've been doing, as we progress with the fact-finding, particularly the seeker process goes into depth. There are, I think, 18 or 19 at least areas that we'll examine, and each one of those categories has multiple pieces to it where we have to make decisions on the severity or not of the impact that particular aspect provides to the process. So by your continuing attendance, I think you will continue to learn more about the process as it goes. I was hoping, or am hoping, that the flow chart helps you understand where we are. But I guess my best advice is to continue to attend and learn as we're learning about the process and the project,
All right, and just one last thing.
certainly.
With what Mr. Morel said, I did not realize that conservation easement, I don't think that's in the spirit of a conservation easement, besides keeping it simple. I don't think that's the spirit of a conservation easement, because that just doesn't make any sense. I would have to look it up, but that doesn't seem at all correct for what an easement would be. You certainly can't have a walking path and go back into the road and then it's lost.
You could get copies. There are 3 different categories of conservation easements, from no-touch to ones that are adapted to the property. And the language, I think, in those easements would help you understand that.
How do we know what kind of easements these are?
Proposing no-touch, I believe. Two different types, no-touch along the south parts of the property, and I believe along the berms, along the roads. That's restricted along the roads, so that they could replace trees that came down, for instance. It would allow certain maintenance features to take place.
And how would that be enforced?
The code department.
So that's who we would call?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
we'd have to keep track of 70 little easements and spy on our neighbors. Is that what we have to do? Is that?
If you chose, I suppose.
Oh, I didn't mean if I chose. I mean to have the easement, if it's an easement, it's an easement. So is the burden on the neighbors?
Oftentimes, probably the enforcement entity would be notified either by a neighbor, concerned resident, drive-bys. Certainly the code enforcement and enforcement officials, they're out in the community, right? They're doing work, and they might recognize as they're driving around and addressing some other scenario that they need to address, they might notice, well, this is supposed to be a conservation easement. So it's not as if there's going to be a weekly assignment for someone for a staff person to actually go out and verify that the easement is being adhered to, but that's, it's just part of being a neighbor, part of being a member of the community, and part of daily administration of enforcement entities. They might be out there and they'll notice.
But since the town's
So,
president is hold harmless, so when somebody does something, it's allowed to be left, we're not going to get anywhere.
I don't think I understand your question.
At the last town, no, not the one yesterday, one 2 weeks ago, the town board meeting, they were talking about hold harmless, and when somebody builds something and it's on an easement, what Victor does is hold harmless.
So that's a different scenario altogether. That may have been some form of utility easement that someone, was it a conservation easement?
That was some sort of drainage.
It was a fence and a utility easement.
Thank you.
So,
I just, I heard the hold harmless, and it's
That's a completely different animal than a conservation easement. And so this planning board has the ability to review these conservation easements, the configuration, and identify whether or not they're going to be meaningful, right? If there's a strange configuration that maybe doesn't make sense, if there's lack of contiguous conservation easement areas, the planning board may suggest, well, let's consolidate this conservation easement to one area of the property, or let's make them contiguous in some fashion to make them meaningful, right? So that decision hasn't been made yet. There may be some feedback in that regard going forward before a decision is made.
All right. And I know I'm pressing, but I have called 4 times about this. At one meeting in 2021, it was stated that there could not be a poured foundation within 75 feet of the creek. And I called because my neighbor not only has a poured foundation, he has heat and electric, and God knows if he has running water. And I said, well, since my neighbor's already done that, what's to prevent any of these people? And I never heard back.
I can't speak to that, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And
It's just I don't know how we can enforce anything when it was stated about the 75 feet, and then all of a sudden I realized, well, heck, the neighbor's, he's right on the creek.
Yeah, we can't
know it's
speak,
poured.
we can't, the board can't speak to what happened with that particular property, but we are reviewing and evaluating this proposal compared to what the standards are today.
Okay, it was only 2 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Who do I ask?
Pardon me?
Who do I ask about how that was allowed to happen? Obviously,
I would probably go to the planning and building department during normal office hours.
that's what the problem is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If anybody else that would like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Kathleen Worrell, and we have property bordering Taylor Road and Harloff. And I just want to reiterate the danger, excuse me, of pulling out from,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
It's okay.
of pulling out from Taylor going left on Strong. I have been driven off the road 3 times. And I tell you, once with a man shaking his fist. And if I had been killed or maimed, more attention would be given to all of the traffic there. Having, how they measure the road with a cord across the road, to tell you the amount of traffic that is coming down isn't the same as living there. And it is a dangerous intersection, not only because of the amount of traffic, but the high speed of the cars coming over that hill. And I wish you would please pay attention to that. I'm not the only one that has been driven off the road. Our next-door neighbors, the Opels, have to go, the woman goes down the other end of Harloff onto Cheese Factory and then left onto Strong. It gets very aggravating to feel that we have no protection and nobody really cares that we live there, and it is very dangerous to pull out, and the number of cars coming out is going to make it even more dangerous to the builders, or not the builders, but the buyers. So I just wanted you to know that there's more to it than what code meets, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, thank you all. Yes.
Lisa, could you go to that slide that showed the 45% not developable from Ed Morrell?
Or one you want.
That's from Mr. Kaiser's.
Mr. Kaiser's first slide, thank you. Mr. Kaiser, yeah. Yes, I just wanted to point out that this would be the typical way you would determine density if you were doing a cluster subdivision within a subdivision, but the underlying zoning here is for 3/4 acre lots. And what happened back in 2000 is they said, well, this district or this area of the town, we don't want any more than 1 lot per 3 acres. or .33 acres per lot. So that's an overlay district as opposed to a restriction for the property based on developable land. It just doesn't apply in this area. If I were to use the underlying density out here, I could get 30 lots out here. But you got to understand that back in 2000, based on the comprehensive plan that underwent in that area, they took this whole area and in many other areas of town and made them low density by 1 lot per 3 acres, in some areas 1 lot per 2 acres. So that's the way this all came about. These lots, there are 3 lots on the north side of Taylor Road that are less than 3 acres, which is the average acreage of these here. There are lots to the north on the west side, many of them, that are less than 3 acres as well. The area here, this is completely consistent with the character of the neighborhood. And then on top of that, we've done a lot of mitigation measures to help it be more consistent. Now, I can't help that there's trees on the north side of Taylor Road that block some of the views of the houses, and we don't have those trees. But if we did have those trees, then we'd have to take out woods to build houses, like I assume many of them did. So the fact that this overdensity thing is a perception, it's not a reality. Like I said before, you'll only see the 3 western lots for some period of time once you build this out from Taylor Road. The berm, the discussion about views from Taylor Road, the berm is 5 foot high. So looking from the road back into the site, you won't see the houses because of the berm and that angle of view, if you will. The markers for well, first of all, the conservation easements, believe me, I don't like to put all these conservation easements all over the place. I'd love to just take this whole back area and make that conservation easement bigger. But the board was concerned, the neighbors were concerned, that if we put in trees and berms and such to screen the view of the homes, that they could knock down the berms and take out the trees. So that's completely the reason for these conservation easements that are all over the place, particularly along both Taylor Road and Strong Road, is to protect from removing those berms. If you want those out of there, believe me, I don't want to put those conservation easements in there. It doesn't help the saleability of the lot. It hinders it. So my suggestion for the markers were to put pine trees in where the corners would be. The trees out here, primarily deciduous, and they would be, something that you would see visible from the other trees out there. The front loading on Lot 5, I don't know if any of these houses could be front loaded or side loaded. The town planning board has no restriction on where to put the garage. And that particular house, again, is way back and buffered by the berm and the trees from the front. So I'm reviewing the other comments here to see if there's anything else. I think they were somewhat redundant. Oh, with regard to the site distance, and I've been out there many, many times. And when you sit at the intersection of Taylor and Strong, and you turn your head right to see if there's cars coming, it's not ideal, Mrs. Morrell. It's not ideal. Which is why I suggested that the developer would be willing to cut back the hill there, or give an easement to the town to cut back the hill there to improve that site distance. It does meet the requirements. Oh, and the location of the driveways, from the very beginning, I said these driveway locations were determined based on site distance, period. So sometimes you see 2 driveways that are close together, sometimes you see them in different parts. So, unlike some of the homes on the other side of the road, we located the homes to maximize the driveways. With regard to digging a foundation within 75 feet of the creek, that's certainly not possible here. We're probably a minimum of maybe 500 feet, 400 at least feet from the creek. I think, after hearing, and I'm not sure where, Mrs. Stanton, which house is yours? Mrs. Stanton? Dolores Stanton, did I get that wrong? I'm sorry. Which, can you go back to the rendering? Across from number 1? Okay.
I can share my screen if that would be okay. I've got the aerial up. Thanks.
Did you point to it, Joe?
Right there.
Oh, so you're downstream from us. Yeah, there's not. But after listening to Mrs., I'm sorry, I still don't have your,
Stanton.
pardon me?
Yes, we did remove, but if you want to
Yeah,
Doris, if you want that on the record, I can't hear you from back there. Just to let you know, I won't be able to type it. Okay.
no, my only thought there is after hearing Dolores and others is probably it would be a good idea to retain the dry wells for downspouts for the 3 western lots, which are the only ones that could impact drainage on the north side of the road. So that would, of course, reduce the drainage. So rather than just rely on the reduction that's in the infiltration basin, I think it would be smart to include dry wells for those rooftops on those 3 lots. After hearing, and I think this is the second time I've heard some of that same situation. So there'll be almost no impervious area. And then the soils, again, themselves are very pervious in that regard. Not sure if I missed. I don't know if they're going to be 2-story homes or 1-story homes. Quite frankly, a lot of people who build houses on these type of lots are seniors, and they would prefer 1-story homes. But I can't say one way or the other. Just like I can't say one way or the other whether they have an end-load or front-load garage. We're suggesting end-load garages. It's a little bit different on the one lot where we showed that, but that certainly could be an end-load as well. And again, that house is way back from the road. And the only way you're going to see those houses when you might glimpse it right down the driveway. And I don't know how many people are going to drive by and count driveways to determine the density in here as opposed to seeing whatever number of houses. So again, you see 3 houses until the drainages, until the trees grow up on the west side. Can't do anything about that because those lots are above the grade. But with regard to the draining, the grading, which one gentleman said was excessive, understand that a lot of that grading was to put berms in so we could provide the buffering to the houses. So that's why that looks like a lot of grading. And again, the other thing with respect to the conservation easements is we would love to get rid of those conservation easements in the front. But if the board wants a more sure situation, that those berms and trees would be held. In fact, the conservation board said they thought the easement locations were well thought out, if you go back and look at their comments. So, again, I have no interest in putting these dinky little conservation easements all over the place, but that was done for that intended purpose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all. The next item on our agenda is the McGuire site plan, application number 035-SP-2022. Mitchell Design Build is the applicant. Applicant's requesting approval to construct a 2,300 square foot parking lot addition, including landscape buffer, sidewalks, a new tenant entrance, and 2 curb cuts off of Old Dutch Road. It's all yours, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know how much more in-depth you'd like me to get on this. I was here a couple weeks ago, received comments during that meeting, and then sent a formal letter back to Lisa to distribute. If there's anything you'd like me to go over in particular, I can. Otherwise, I like to think I took care of many of the comments and questions that you guys had last time.
We'll start with Ernie again. Ernie, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, I asked the question about the types of trees that you were going to put in there,
Yep,
and you said you'd check on that and let me know.
yes.
Have you done that?
Yeah, yes, we completely changed the landscaping plan altogether. So conifers are going all along the west side of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
How about you, Scott?
I went through what you did, and I think you did a good job.
Thank you.
You really answered the questions that I think were in my mind last time. I think the photograph was deceptive when you looked at it, because the
Sure.
property line came out by the edge of pavement. So seeing a certified survey like that makes
Great.
the dimensions a lot more real. The only question I had, and I saw the visual, or the light analysis that you did from the neighborhood
Okay,
to the west, and I actually drove out there tonight just to occupy that area and to see what I could see as I drive around. And I also took a look at the elevations of that area using county LiDAR versus where we are with this building, and the elevations are about the same. The topography drops off, but then it comes back up to where those buildings are. And I agree that what you can see mostly from those homes is the lights from, I think, is it Danforth?
Yes.
Is that what it is? Next to you. So I do believe they block, with the exception of the two areas that you did show. So your analysis verifies what I saw.
Great.
The only question I have, I kind of posed it to Wes after the meeting last time, was the proximity of the one curb cut to the 251 intersection, and if his traffic person had any comment relative to that. Is that too close? Is that reasonable? I guess, Wes, I had emailed you that question a couple.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm not sure I've got an answer for you on that tonight. Why don't I can look into the code here while we're talking and see if I can identify anything with regard to the access management code.
That was the only question I had. I think you did a very good job of
Thank you.
responding to our questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Al, do you want to talk while we're waiting?
No, I think Scott, I agree with Scott. I think you did a good job responding to the concerns and questions that we raised at the last meeting, so I'm
glad I could help.
And I'm looking at your letter of the 19th, your comment number 2, talking about the layout with the trees and all the trees that are coming out, the trees that are going in.
Yes.
And I believe that it addresses the concerns of the neighbors. We did receive another letter from a neighbor concerning that. And I just, while Wes is in the codes, I want to make sure that we are in compliance with that, the code that she cites in her letter. So
Okay.
maybe it's appropriate that you're in the codes right now too, sir.
Oh, is this the
That, yeah,
21124? Yeah, so I'll just bounce to that here real quick. So there was a comment from Amy Bartel regarding making sure that the development comply with section 21124 of the town code. So just to clarify, 21124 describes the requirements for light industrial districts in general. So it's a very broad section. There are specific elements and paragraphs that would apply in certain circumstances. And this particular project, for example, is not going to have any outdoor storage, and you're not manufacturing anything. You're not, so there are certain provisions in this section 21124 that aren't applicable based on the use. However, one of the concerns was in regard to screening, right? And in order to properly screen the building from our residential neighborhood and comply with section 21124 of the town code, this person suggested coniferous trees are especially important to maintain code compliance, since the plans show that existing building height will be increased, so on. So the specific section that has to do with screening is section 21124, paragraph D11, which describes the following. Whenever a permitted use in the district, meaning the light industrial district, is located adjacent to any other district, A fully landscaped buffer shall be provided along the full length of the adjacent district. A 100-foot buffer shall be required adjacent to residential districts, and a 30-foot buffer shall be required adjacent to other districts. This buffer area shall be planted and perpetually maintained with live trees and shrubs at least 6 feet in height, and shall have such other grading and landscaping as necessary to visually and audibly screen the industrial activity from the adjacent district. So basically, what this is saying is that if the property abuts a different zoning district, then this would apply. This particular property does not abut an adjoining zoning district. It is surrounded completely by light industrial, with the exception of to the south on New York State Route 251. I think that is the opposite side of 251 is a different zoning district. So, and you're not doing any work on the south side of the building.
That's correct.
Right? It's all on the west side.
Correct.
Near Old Dutch Road. So, with regard to complying with code and buffering, I think you've done, it sounds like the planning board is generally satisfied with the landscaping buffer that you're providing in your current depiction.
I agree. I think it addresses the neighbors' concerns, whether or not the code applies.
Sure.
So, thank you.
And I think also the landscaping consultant indicated he was satisfied with what you presented, and I think you also indicated that you had lowered the lights.
We did, yes, yes.
So I think that's,
Very responsive.
that's worth noting.
Thank you. How we doing there, Wes?
Yeah.
You should have been
I'm
multitasking.
doing okay. Let me just look this up. So I'm also going to reference the Town of Victor's design and construction standards, and that's going to provide us some guidance. And apologize for not being ready for this particular question. However, I believe, based on the DNC standards, and I will also verify and confirm with Lorenzo's team, that the spacing between the intersection of New York State Route 251 and the southernmost proposed access point is adequate and safe. But we can make that a condition of a resolution if the planning board finds that to be appropriate. So there is a standard detail that the town has. It's called, where is it here? I don't understand what's going on with my computer. I don't think that's right. It's awkward. It's standard detail RS6, the driveway layout detail. It depicts a minimum separation distance from the intersection of edge of roadway pavement of 55 feet. And I think you're well beyond
Yes.
55 feet there. So
Yes.
we do know that it meets the town's standard that's in their current design and construction standards.
Okay.
But on top of that, I will confirm that this is a safe layout with Lorenzo.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because of the Valvoline project that we have before us, and with that and Delta Sonic and the entrance over there by where Denny's used to be, that will now be Valvoline. I mean, that's a really good example of how when you have a curb cut that's more than 55 feet or whatever, how as the community grows and traffic increases, how that becomes more problematic than you thought it was going to be when it was first approved. So I really kind of ask that more in the vein of traffic, but I also note that Old Dutch Road is not exactly Fisher's Road. Doesn't carry the same amount of traffic, and it probably never will. But nevertheless, I just feel it's a question worth asking.
It's appropriate.
And obviously, I'll add the intention is to keep the driveway across from the current Danforth driveway. So I feel like any shift in that might be.
Does it agree with that? Does it agree with location?
That's the intention, yes.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I didn't know that, but then that would tend to be, I think, mitigating the.
Both driveways,
Yeah.
the northern driveway as well lines up with the other Danforth driveway.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Anybody from the public that wish to comment? The public hearing is still open. I'd like a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move it.
Second?
Second.
By Al, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 4-0. We do have a draft resolution. Everybody on the board got one?
Yep.
Okay. This is a resolution for McGuire Site Plan, 8050 State Route 251, application number 35-SP-2022 and 11-SU-2022. Whereas the planning board made the following findings of fact, and there are 14 of them. Whereas the Town of Victor Planning Board allows the 80-foot setback for parking to be reduced to 74 feet. Whereas the Town of Victor Planning Board reviewed the unlisted action on January 24th, 2023, and identified no significant impacts. Now therefore be it resolved that the project McGuire Site Plan will not have a significant impact on the environment and that a negative declaration be prepared. And be it further resolved that the application of Mitchell Design Build site plan entitled McGuire Site Plan, drawn by Mitchell Design Build, dated December 6, 2022, last revised January 19th, 2023, received by the Planning Board on 12/6/22, Planning Board application number 35-SP-2022, and special use permit 11-SU-2022 be approved with the following conditions. Conditions to be addressed prior to the chairman's signature on the site plan, that number one, that no final signatures will be given on the plans until all legal and engineering fees have been paid per fee reimbursement local law adopted on 11/25/96. Number two, that the comments in a letter dated January 3rd, 2023 from Labella Associates be addressed. And three, that the comments in a letter dated 12/30/22 from the code officer be addressed. And the ongoing conditions are as follows. Number one, that the site plan comply with the Town of Victor design and construction standards for land development, including Section 4. Number two, that a highway work permit be obtained prior to construction of the curb cuts on Old Dutch Road. And third, that any exterior lighting be compliant to code and approved by the code enforcement officer. And be it further resolved that the planning board secretary distribute the planning board's approval letter. Motion to approve?
I'll move.
Are there any motions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just had a potential edit for a condition based on.
You got to do a waiver, right, for the corridor, the 80-foot setback? Don't we have to do a waiver? Oh, I'm sorry, that's in the whereas?
Yeah, we found that as a
Is that number
whereas.
correct?
Yeah, that was one of the.
Sorry, I missed the whereas.
Yeah, that's okay. I was droning on.
So one of the conditions, if you want to continue on with this particular topic, is that the town engineer confirm separation of southernmost access point to the New York State Route 251 intersection be found to be safe and adequate for anticipated future traffic volumes.
That sounds good.
I agree. So a motion to approve as amended.
I'll move.
Ernie?
Second.
Second by Al, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the Royal Car Wash Site Plan Modification. Application is 001-SP2023. The applicant is MDC Coast 24 LLC. The project is on 607 to 609 Raleigh Road. Applicant is requesting approval to add 6 new trees to help mitigate the loss of 3 trees that were intended to remain on site for previously approved site plan. Gentlemen,
Good evening, guys. Well, our story's pretty short. You pretty much hit...
just your name and your...
Sorry, my name is Austin Goodwin, representing Pastro Associates. With me is Rick Carosa.
With Royal Wash Development.
Thank you.
And our story's pretty short. You hit more than half of it just with the definition right there. Again, we're doing the Victor site on Route 96, and during paving, the contractor out there was doing the pavement excavation for the new parking lot for the vacuum stalls. While doing so, the excavator hit roots to the 3 trees that were located in that area, ripped them, and as such, the tree was unsavable. Of course, we all know accidents happen, but this is, of course, something we don't want to take lightly. We don't want to just say, whatever. So we want to come to you with a modified site plan to not only replace the 3 trees that were lost, but to double the amount that were lost, to show that it was an accident, and we're here to make things right, to make sure that you guys are happy with the design once it's complete. The trees that would be going in are 3 scarlet oak trees, 2 white spruce trees, and 1 Zelkova tree, which is consistent with the landscape plan that was previously approved for the project already. We're just adding more of them to take care of the trees that were lost. We did get comment from Bruce Zaretsky, who is the landscape consultant for the town, who provided no comment to the amended 6 trees added. And unless you guys have any questions for us, we are more than happy to entertain them.
In my conversations with the planning board staff, it was noted that on as many as 4 occasions, somebody was given reminders that the trees needed to be remarked and saved, and they were not marked when the contractor whacked the roots. Talk about that a little bit, why the trees weren't marked?
I've spoken to Victor.
On the microphone, if you would.
I've spoke with Victor Excavating, and it was just purely a mistake. They felt that as they were doing the excavating, they were damaging so many roots around those trees that they took it upon themselves to make the decision to basically, that they figured the trees weren't going to live anyway, and they were just going to replace the trees. Unfortunately, I said, well, we should have called for approval, called the town, and so that's what should have been done. So
Had they been marked, would they have thought twice, do you think?
I can't answer that. I guess possibly. Yeah. So, but the way they explained it, they said, they're very experienced. They said that during many projects, this is done all the time, but again, it came down, we had some words, and, because last thing we wanted to do is Royal Wash Development was upset anybody at the town, understanding how important those trees were. But, we'll do anything we have to do to, make it right. And hopefully the 6 trees that we add is okay, but again, we do apologize.
One of the trees that came down, I think, was 18 caliper inches. It was pretty mature.
Yeah.
What are the size of the trees you're proposing?
So, Lisa, is the slideshow that was sent by Mr. Burns in the slideshow presentation today?
Is that the one?
Yes. So, do you mind if I walk over here?
No, or we got the laser if you'd like. That way we can keep you on the mic as well.
Perfect. So on the LA plan, that table right down there shows what the minimum caliper size that are proposed to go in for the new trees are to be, which are chosen through town code.
Hold on just a second. She
sure.
has the wrong, that was 2022.
Oh, yes, that says 2022, correct. That one, there it is.
Thank you.
So that table has the minimum caliper size that we would have to put in for new trees. Again, like you said, the ability to go buy a tree of that size is not something that could be reasonably done. We can go buy trees, we can buy a tree that meets town code to the minimum caliper size, but ultimately, we can't replace a tree 1-for-1 of that size. So another reason why we went and said, let's double the amount that was taken out, as a way for us to hope that you would find that as a appropriate mitigation for a little more trees taken out. Well, we'll put twice as many back that were taken out.
Okay. Al, do you have any comments?
No comments.
How about Ernie?
Yep, sounds reasonable to me.
Scott?
So is what is the caliper then? The caliper being the approximate diameter?
Diameter, yeah.
Correct.
Is it 1.5 inches to 2 inches? Is that what it is?
I can't read it from here without going closer, but
I'm looking at this drawing in my handout here.
Yeah, so depending on the species, there's 1.5 to 2 caliper.
Thank you.
2 inch, 2 to 2.5 inch, and then the spruce are 6 to 7 feet in height.
6 to 7 inches?
No, 6 to 7 feet in height. I think usually when you talk about evergreens, that's usually the height.
Gotcha.
I guess it's a judgment on the part of the board as to whether, that's okay. I mean, Al, I know you've been involved with this project quite a bit, and I've yielded to you and your opinion on this. So,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, since most of this is viewed from the thruway, I'm less concerned about the view shed.
Okay. So if Al's happy, I'm happy.
So
I just need to get my wife to state that.
I'm not happy that the trees came out. I think given 4 opportunities to mark them, and that led to an assumption by the excavator, the contractor, to go ahead and just take them out. What's done is done. My suggestion, it would make me happier if you didn't go with the minimum size. You got the biggest ones that you could afford to put in, and that would fit the size, that would get them growing a little faster, a little bit bigger. But that's just a thought on my part rather than anything I'm going to hold you to. Anybody?
I'm okay with that,
Okay.
I don't think it's a bad thing to go higher, and I think, being in this business for quite a while, it's, we really shouldn't reinforce the ability of the excavator to design the project. So I think maybe adding a larger tree might be a good symbol of,
My only concern to that at the moment is, being that these are not a man-made object, we, to a point, are subject to the nursery's inventory. So I would hate for you guys to say, well, we want a tree this size, and then a nursery says, we don't have anything like that, and you're not going to have it for a couple of years. And then in which case, you guys have a spot where a tree should be, that tree doesn't get put in until one of minimum size has grown to that size, and in that time period, a tree could have grown to that size in that spot anyway.
And again, it's just a thought, as Scott indicated, a gesture of goodwill, a symbol, acknowledgement of the mistake, maybe. We're going to try to do better.
Is that something, would it be okay if, we search for those trees, and if we, we'll do the best we can to find them?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we
Make the
agree
effort,
with your
yeah.
comments, so we'll do our best to find those, and we don't have a problem with that.
Works for me.
I think if you can show a reasonable effort, and if for some reason they're not in stock or something like that, they're impossible to get, I'd be surprised, but I think if you show an effort, I think that'd be a positive thing.
Yeah,
Do the best you can.
we're all for that, yeah.
Yeah, just in regard to that, this most recent topic here, with regard to finding larger nursery stock, one of the things that the planning board you might want to consider, and I'm not sure where your train of thought was, but is to not approve an updated landscaping plan until you have more information from the applicant in terms of what the size trees, what size trees they can get, rather than approving a plan tonight. But this is completely up to you. That's just another thought. It's completely up to the board.
I think that's a good suggestion. Why don't we see what they can come up with? I mean, this isn't something you're going to do tomorrow, right?
A little too cold.
Well,
So if we have a 2-week period to work with or something, I mean, is that a problem?
There is a problem because they have a stop work order on the project.
Oh, okay.
So if you let us know that if that's the case, we can lift the stop work order if they're going to come back. I don't have a problem with that as long as it's directed by you.
Does that make sense to the board?
Does, to me. I don't know what the rest of them.
I think to button it up and make sure that we have the best option, release the stop work order, and we'll see in a couple of weeks.
With a proposal of the nursery stock that you can find that's available, or will be available in spring when you're ready to plant, right? Does that work?
Yes, that would be a decision
Yeah, I
for you.
guess the biggest thing is if we could continue to do the work, because we probably won't find those trees right now. It's probably going to take some time, I would imagine. And I'm not a landscape expert, but, those trees might be available in a couple, maybe in the spring, but.
Yeah, I don't think there would be an expectation that they be planted, right now or
Yeah.
then the next month, right?
Yeah.
I think the planning board in the town would probably be satisfied if at some point during this upcoming growing season, maybe by June, I don't know exactly, but, I think they're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a stop work order on the project. I figured you wouldn't be planting largely due to the weather, not because of the stop work order. So, but if you can research what's available and obtain it by, say, June, for planting sometime between now and then, seems like a decent caliper and it's commercially available.
Oh,
So procedurally then, where does that put us
Well, I was just
tonight?
gonna say, could we do it with a condition prior to
You beat me to
signature
it.
on site plan that, evidence of procurement of acceptable stock, that we, again, we don't have to come back for an approval if it's one of the ongoing conditions? Or condition prior to signature?
So, not trying to get this overly complicated, right?
I'm trying to keep it as
Yeah.
simple as we can, but maybe
And,
that's.
that's a fine suggestion. The only issue there is that the board would be leaving it up to maybe town staff or maybe the landscape architect, the town's landscape architect, to make that decision. And maybe that's the appropriate person, is to have the landscape architect to identify, yes, this is more substantial, this is adequate.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly deferred to our consultants on other similar type topics. So I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay. I can,
Yes,
let me
Mrs.
draft it.
Zarinski.
So let me go through the first part of it, and you can get me the conditions when we go to ongoing.
Or prior to signature, whatever it's, yeah.
So, just to clarify, would it be that we would do modified site plan approval on the condition that we would submit to Mr. Zaretsky, the LA consultant, and he finds that what we submit is acceptable? So the town board would refer to the landscape architect, the professional, to that matter to say, yes, I believe that this is appropriate, this is findable, this is something that they can achieve, and that they find that that is an acceptable size or caliper that we can find and propose to him, and he feels that it is, I don't know how a better way to put it, but he finds that that is a appropriate effort.
Appropriate. And will we put a time frame on that?
Yeah, so I think the planning board is probably looking for a response that's relatively near in the future, right? So in the next 2 weeks, if you're able to do some research and identify with nursery suppliers what type of tree you can get within the next 3-4 months to be able to plant, and then provide that information to the planning and building office with an updated landscape plan, identifying here are the trees, here are the sizes, and then the planning and building office can refer that to the landscape architect.
Sure.
And then, provided that the landscape architect
that's
is
acceptable?
satisfied after hearing the planning board's concerns, then I think that plan would be ready for signature. But you need a deadline, you probably need a deadline by which you need this updated plan, right? I mean, we don't want to just let it float out there until May.
Right.
So,
And they would need to plant those trees prior to them getting, they have a building permit right now, currently, for the vacuums. So before we issued a certificate of compliance on those vacuums, they would need to comply with the site plan. We would make sure that those trees were planted.
Makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Agreed.
That makes sense.
That's an appropriate way to hold our hand, make sure we do it.
Sure.
I guess one last question or comment. Is all the site excavation work complete now, or do we still have other trees at risk?
No. No, there's much more work to do.
Right, so-
They just scratched the surface.
No
on
more
it.
trees-
No more trees at risk, though?
No, no.
Okay, I was gonna say, because to enforce the marking off of the trees, but if that's not relevant, then.
Yeah, it's moot.
Do we want the landscape architect to know that we're looking for something greater than the minimum size?
I had asked him that question this morning. He was not in the area where he could look at a PDF, so I'm still waiting for a comment back from him. But I did ask it this morning.
Okay. Very good. So I'll start the resolution.
Okay.
Okay, so resolution for Royal Car Wash landscape modifications, today's date. Oh, I didn't even know it was open, all right. Yep. Okay, so I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Move.
Second?
Very good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, thank you, that you didn't kick me. Application number 01-SP-2023, whereas the planning board made the following findings of fact, and there are 6 of them. whereas the Town of Victor Planning Board reviewed the unlisted action on 24 January 2023 and identified no significant impacts. Now therefore be it resolved that the project, Royal Car Wash landscape modification, will not have a significant impact on the environment, and that a negative declaration be prepared, and be it further now resolved that application of MDC Coast 24 LLC, 2851 Monroe Avenue, Rochester, New York, site plan entitled Royal Car Wash Site Modification, drawn by Passero Associates, dated January 6, 2023, received by the Planning Board January 10th, 23, Planning Board application number 01SP-2023, be approved with the following conditions. Conditions to be addressed prior to the chairman's signature on the plans. One, that no final signatures will be given on the plans until all legal and engineering fees have been paid as per fee reimbursement local law adopted November 25th, 1996. Ongoing conditions, one, that the site plan comply with Town of Victor design and construction standards for land development, including Section 4. Second, that a building permit be obtained before the start of construction. 3, that the previously approved landscaping elements consisting of 6 green vase saw-leaf salcova and 12 neon flash spirea, including the addition of 2 white spruce, 3 scarlet oak, and 1 green vase saw-leaf salcova on the landscaping plan, intended to screen the new parking and vacuum area from the adjacent roadway, be perpetually maintained as an effective screen between the facility and New York State Route 96, and that if any of the aforementioned landscaping fails to provide an effective screen due to death or disease of any one or a number of particular trees, shrubs, or bushes, the vegetation be replaced with the same or equivalent trees, shrubs, or bushes in a timely manner so as to provide the perpetual screening desired by the planning board. And fourth?
No, actually, it'd be number 2 on the,
I think that. Yep, I think this is going to be number 2, under conditions to be addressed prior to the chairman's signature on the site plan.
Thank you.
I've got a quick draft here. That the applicant provide an updated landscape plan to the Planning and Building Office by February 14th, 2023, for referral to the town's landscape architect for review, and that the landscape architect confirm that the updated landscape plan is adequate to address the concerns and requests of the planning board that were noted at the January 24th, 23rd planning board meeting regarding the need for a more substantial caliper and size tree so as to compensate for
The inadvertent loss of
the loss of trees that were supposed to be preserved. Something of that nature.
Also the mature trees.
that works.
Okay. Now, is that February 14th date okay? That gives them, what's that, 3
Give you
weeks?
time to get to Bruce and back?
Well, so that's just the date by which they would need to provide the updated plan. That gives them about 3 weeks to communicate with nurseries, to identify.
research.
Right.
That's where they're going, yes. That they would, sorry, I'm just clarifying for him, yes, that would relieve your stop work order, giving site plan approval on the condition that we submit this information to them. Yeah, right. By the next planning board meeting.
Very good. So I guess a motion to approve the resolution as amended?
I'll move it.
Second?
Second.
Second by Ernie, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Very good, gentlemen.
Thank you all.
Yep. Thank
We
you.
very much appreciate it.
And Wes wanted to give us an update very quickly. There's been, or on the cannabis regulations that we talked about at the last meeting, there's been some developments, I guess?
Yeah, if I could just maybe share my screen, Susie. Thank you, I appreciate your assistance in this. Actually, let me bring up. General consultation. So there's been a potential, a slight change in the overlay district boundary, which it's not exactly depicted on this map, and this is going to be a little bit difficult to see, but I'm going to try to point out with my pointer. There's been some discussion here at the town hall, and this area, in the area in this location, this is about where Men's Warehouse is, right? It's adjacent to a residential zoning district. And then there is a building down here in, is it Victor Crossing? Is that the name of that development? Where Pie Craft Pizza is located.
Right.
And then Five Guys is in here. And there might be a couple of buildings in here. So they would like to pull the boundary of this overlay district away from the residential district, right? So as to not allow for cannabis retail sales in these areas around, I think it's, is it-
Rolling Meadows subdivision.
Yes, there you go. Meadowlark Lane. So there's a slight change in the draft regulation that the town board may consider at a future meeting that excludes these buildings in this location here.
And would they do that by moving that red boundary line?
So this red boundary line is simply a depiction of an existing 100-foot buffer requirement for commercial properties. Any commercial development in the commercial zone has to adhere to a 100-foot buffer when the development adjoins a residential zoning district. So that's an existing requirement. So actually, this black dashed line would change so as to exclude these buildings in this location.
And any future that would go in there, I suppose? Or is there more room to develop, like we added on to that one building right there on the corner?
Oh,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, that would encompass that potential addition to that building, too. It would exclude that.
Anything that, okay.
Right.
Well, then anything on the other side of that line is an area in which you could have
Dispensary.
a dispensary.
Correct.
I guess my comment is, I think we're so splitting hairs that it's irrelevant. That we think that somehow preserves the nature of the environment. I just think it's ridiculous.
Has the town board had their public hearing on this?
So they're going to hold a public hearing in a few weeks on the draft regulations. And so basically, we just want to solicit from the planning board again here, if you concur, to still have the town board be the seeker lead agency for the potential adoption, or I should say, for the consideration of a local law.
No, they said they want to, so let them have it.
Okay.
And they have our comments from last time.
They do. Yep.
But that's interesting. I mean, this kind of reminds me of discussions I had with towns in the past about adult entertainment.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing.
Well, some would argue maybe this is worse.
Yeah, depending on your point of view, but I think this is a classic no-win situation. I don't
Well, it is, but I think trying to get that granular with the boundaries, I think, is
Right.
just unnecessary. You either want it or you don't, and it's either going to be zoned in this general area or it's not.
Yeah. Wes, when you're done with this, I had a couple of things I just wanted to bring up if I could before we close the meeting.
I'm all set. I think we have the feedback we need here. I appreciate your attention to the
And
matter.
if it's a done deal, as it seems to be, I would support changing the boundaries, but to Al's point, yeah,
Yeah.
I just live up the hill from there, so it's not going to affect me all that
Let
much.
smoke
I can
rise.
get there- I can get there if I need to.
So again, I'll just say, we don't want the exhaust from a Burger King, but
Right.
okay.
I-
Are you good? You heard what you need to hear?
Joe, I just wanted to mention a couple observations I had this week. One observation was that that site that we approved, and Kim and I have talked about this, on Phillips Road at Fisher's Road, where the towing company is.
Oh, how neat it was going to look, and
Yeah, and I drove by the other day and I couldn't believe what I saw, so I took pictures of it and I'll share those with you. But they've got signs out there for remote starters. They've got, these ratty signs within the right-of-way. And then they had cars for sale out in the right-of-way and smashed up cars in the right-of-way. And I just don't remember that being what we approved. And then,
It wasn't.
We had taken him to court to get him to comply. We finally got him in his C of O. We need to go back. If you can send the pictures, we'll
will.
go back and just check what he has out there against what the approved site plan was.
Is he going to finish painting that house?
That was another thing I noticed.
It's a lot of, I hate to say babysitting, but it's babysitting.
Yeah.
Well, I've had interaction with that guy in the past, so I'm
Yeah.
not surprised this is happening.
Yeah.
Okay, the second item that I wanted to mention was on the treetop project that we did, that one that's by Fisher's Ridge. I'm sorry?
Timber top.
The Timber Top or whatever it's called. And remember when that project came in and they had a real estate sign in the front, was for sale or for lease or whatever? So I drove by last night and the real estate sign has been changed over to a person, Jamie, whatever. her name is.
Seabold.
But it's got lights on it. It's illuminated.
So I think Adam, code enforcement, Adam has been out there recently to talk to him about the sign. He's got a sign propped up in the window in the front also, and then the real estate sign. So
It just struck me as much more of a billboard.
I didn't realize it was lit.
I didn't either. I had driven by before and I thought, that's kind of tacky. And then I drove by last night and it's illuminated like a billboard.
More tacky.
It's only lit at night, though.
Yeah, well, that's right. You always err on the positive side. But not for nothing. There is a billboard on 332 and she's on that one too, so just FYI. In Kennedy. So this is a proliferation
know.
of something else, but I don't think the property, I assume she was a real estate person with a property and she was here at the,
It's his girlfriend.
yes, and his girlfriend and
Yes,
all.
yes,
That's nice.
yes.
But I don't want to see her illuminated at night when I drive by. So that's what I wanted to share with the board.
Okay, we'll take it back to code
I
enforcement.
just thought I'd let you know.
Thank
And
you.
I'll share those pictures with you, because I did drive
Yeah, if
by.
you just email him.
And there was a for sale sign on one of them, and I circled back a little later, and that car had been moved, but there was a for sale sign right in front of it. Out of our right-of-way, which is where they're parked.
Right. Okay,
Just wanted to tell you.
yes, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Ernie?
Second.
Second, Al, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I think the vice chair did a good job.
Thank you.